Welcome to the Lovecars On the Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff, Needell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars On the Grid, your global motorsport podcast roundup, where we look back on a weekend with no Formula One, but we take a look at Formula One on water. We'll come on to that in a moment. More frustration for poor old Elfyn Evans in the Rally Chile. It wasn't his toys that led him down this time, but again, we'll let you know what that was. Great entertainment as always from MotoGP. Toprak is back. Toprak is back. That's easy for you to say. World Superbikes. Ryde continues in his British Superbikes winning streak. And the Collards are crowned British GT champions. It was almost a done deal anyway, but good on them. And there wasn't the normal excitement, as Tiff gets very excited about NASCAR, but for the boys in Kansas, unless you like the sight of smashing melons. There's only one way that's going. But first, in the news, some sad news, Tiff.
We have to start with Rupert Keegan. He's had cancer battle for many years now, and sadly passed away at the age of just 69. And Rupert I raced against him in Formula Ford and Formula 3, and he was really the last, I think, of the Playboy Grand Prix drivers who nowadays you have to be fully fit and not seen out with anyone except your wife or your partner. And Rupert was just another James Hunt without perhaps quite the talent of James Hunt. But he arrived on my Formula 4. He was one of the first sort of rich kids. His dad owned British Air Ferries, and he just came out, just crashed, just went fast and crashed and fast and crashed. He didn't build up slowly, Rupert. But he had the money to have a new car every weekend if he crashed. There's a wonderful photo. I can't find it. I thought I had it. Of the whole pack coming up to Paddock Hill Bend in a Formula Ford race. And we used to have midfield shunts because the grids in those days were 3-2, 3-2. We were a packed grid of lunatic children. And literally Rupert's gone over the back of someone. His car is side on above my head as I went underneath him with the BAF, British Air Ferries logo. And he quickly.
Is that picture in your book? Is that in your book?
I don't know. The picture's not there, but it was Rupert full, and he always had girlfriends galore. He went straight into Formula 3 in 76. He was only about 21, I think. He was one of the youngest young playboy with money. And he won the championship again famously. He had to, if he beat Bruno Giacomelli, the factory March driver, Thruxness was last round of the championship. I was in the race, having my second ever Formula 3 race. And if Bruno didn't score, Rupert would win the championship. And they were both on the front row. I think Rupert was on the outside. There was someone in the middle, and Bruno was on pole. And Rupert literally lined up his car at an angle on the outside of the grid and just launched towards the inside of the corner. And I think that was a Swedish guy who was second on the grid. He backed out, knowing what was going to happen. And Rupert just took Bruno out, the apex of turn one, championship won. And obviously in those days, I don't know quite how we got away with it, but I think if he'd got disqualified, that's the point of taking someone out. You can't give the bloke that was. I suppose you could do a points deduction, couldn't you, for the attacker, which probably happens nowadays. It was a famous moment. He then got sponsorship and headed into Formula One. I think he got Penthouse sponsorship. So everywhere he went, he had Penthouse pets all lying over there. He had the Penthouse pet on his Hesketh. I was actually in Monaco in 77 doing Formula 3, and he virtually, we saw him going round at the end of the race, about 5 laps down, virtually collapsed every corner. And they had to carry him out of the car completely exhausted because, we had no fitness and no drinks bottles and no cooling in those days. Cars with, manual gear shifts, so they're much harder physically. And he did about 25 Grand Prix over 3 or 4 seasons, always in back of the grid cars. And he came back to the British Championship, which I was also in 79. He won that. He had a good run and won. He had still done a couple of big shunts doing it. And then he finally went off to America to try and get IndyCar drive. It didn't work, and tried to qualify at Indy 500, which didn't work in about 1985. And then went off into a variety of devious investments and business. The money ran out, family money ran out. He was just a fantastic character, always smiling, always laughing, always a cigarette on the go and a drink in his hand. And he lived life to the full, let's say. He's died a bit younger than the average, but will always be very fondly remembered by those who ever met Rupert Keegan.
Thank you for that lovely tribute. Tiff, in more back to current day, I guess. Well, no, back to current day. What are we even talking about? This has just happened. But in other news, Callum Ilott has secured the IndyCar deal, so for a drive for next year. So I'm
delighted,
delighted for Callum. Well, lovely
one of those
lad.
Talents, one of those talents that didn't quite make it to Formula One. You know, he's Formula 2 star and Formula 3 and did everything you should do. And of course, has raced in IndyCar for a couple of seasons, or one season at least. I can't remember. A wonderful sort of casual character. He doesn't get too anal when he's interviewed, and he laughs and jokes. And that was a bit of a shame. I crashed the car.
Ferrari Academy boy.
Yeah, yes, that's right. He raced for Prema, of course, in Formula 3, so he knows the Prema team. And he had a couple of outings last year with McLaren when they dumped their drivers. They were mucking about, weren't they, with their drivers to line up, and a couple of runs with them. So I reckon he'd go really well. So I'm looking forward to seeing Callum in the new Prema car. Because the only other bit of news, apart from the swearing controversies, goes on with Max saying, I'm going to quit, and Helmut Marko saying he's not joking, and everybody saying it's the most stupid rule. And I keep on listening more and more now to other sports. The golfers were effing and blinding, loudly. And then, of course, Marc Marquez will come to a MotoGP. He had a right old FQ2 statement when he was being interviewed. And these words, they do come out, where it's just when you sort of hit with something, you just say them, and they're just there, whatever sport you're in. But still no news of Audi / Sauber deciding who's going to take the last place in Formula One next year. Will it be Bottas? Let's hope not. I want it to be Porsche, because I think he's their reserve driver and deserves at least 1 year in the car. Give him 1 year. But everyone else talking about Bortoletto, the F2 Championship leader, who, of course, he's signed with McLaren. He's a McLaren protege. Williams are trying to say, well, what about Colapinto? And meanwhile, Zhao is saying, what about my 60 million pounds worth of Chinese yin-yangs or yens or whatever they are? So still that one seat remains untaken.
One little bit of news from me. I don't know whether you've got any more, but our mate, he's our best mate, of course, especially if he's going to head into Formula One. Our little mate, Freddie Slater, 16 years of age, just won the Italian F4 championship. He won it. He dominated, actually. I think he won like 15 races. Good on Fred Slater.
He's also been nominated. He's one of the 4 that's been nominated for the Autosport Awards.
He's got to win, hasn't he? Who else is there? Who else in it?
It's an incredibly tight list. I've got them in my magazine just here. So there's this Deegan Fairclough, age 18, who's a Formula 4 champion, been very dominant in Formula 4 this year, British Formula 4. Arvid Lindblad, we all know about, sort of Swedish name, but a British driver that's been doing Formula 3. He did he's just done one Formula 2 race, hasn't he? Because he joined in, or he's doing the next round, the F2. But he's been winning in Formula 3. Louis Sharp, who dominated the GB3 championship. So they're all, it's a very, 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 very talented quartet will be doing their tests.
Good news for British racing of the future.
Hopefully, yes. I know we're full of talent. It's incredible. We've already got loads in Grand Prix racing, and we've got loads lined up to join. They'll have a ban. FIA will ban too many British drivers if we have too many.
So here's a pop quiz for you. What is the oldest competitive international competitive sport race in the world? The sport, the oldest international competition in the world.
I've no idea. A ridiculous question. How are we supposed to know that? Crofty. Where's Crofty? You've been speaking of Crofty again, haven't you?
It is the America's Cup. It's the oldest international competition in the world.
Is indeed.
And second oldest is golf, actually, the Ryder Cup.
Where was that first America's Cup
just
race?
Down the road from you. Just
down
down the road from
well
you.
done. Just checking. And
Queen Victoria was waving.
Where did the famous phrase, "There's no second place, so you're the first loser if you're in second place. There's no second place, you're the first loser." That's the sort of modern equivalent, right? Do you know where that came from?
That was all about Victoria, wasn't it?
It was indeed. The Isle of Wight. The Americans came sailing past Cowes, and Queen Victoria was waving, "Well done, America, well done, America." And then she just looked up the Solent and looked, and then said to her attaché, or butler, whatever, "Where's the second boat?" To which the answer was, "There is no second place." And that's where that famous, "there is no second, you're just the first loser," came from as well.
And,
anyway, yes,
if our regular
America's
listeners are wondering what on earth we're talking about, it is the Formula One of the seas, and it really is high-tech sailing.
It's all going on at the moment. We thought it was well worth chatting about because there is so much Formula One at the moment, because sort of Ineos are the sponsors of this amazing entrepreneur, Jim Ratcliffe, who owns a third of Mercedes Formula One team. Toto's got a third, Mercedes have a third, and he has a third. He now owns a quarter of Manchester United Football Club. And of course, he's been backing and financing this Britain's attempt to win the America's Cup, which is something they've never won. He's got was Ben Ainsley, isn't it? Is the guy that is the leading sailor. And it's just a fantastic story because he's had the Mercedes Formula One team doing all their aeronautical boys. Aerodynamics are involved so much. The hull, it's these amazing machines. Well, you went down to Spain and saw them, didn't you? They didn't race.
I did with Pirelli. There's loads of automotive links: Pirelli, Ineos, Cupra. Loads of it. So I went there with Pirelli to see the Luna Rossa Pirelli boat. Unbelievable, all carbon fiber.
I know.
It's just it's an incredible bit of kit.
But it's just like Formula One, where they're looking at the blades that go underneath, the foils, the aero on the foils. Everything's all aero, just like Formula One. In fact, the racing is again like Formula One and so many sports. They're aero dominated because if you lose the start, the bad air, you can't follow the dirty air. So a lot of the races are a bit, despite the commentators forever saying, we're going to have some amazing, this racing's going to be fantastic. It's normally the one that leads at the beginning wins because you can't, because the leader will take the optimum course, whichever the wind's blowing. But you can't follow him in the optimum course because you're stuck in dirty air. So almost immediately they'll turn and go in a different direction to try and find another route. But it's just fascinating to see these craft doing their 50 knots, which is about 60 miles an hour, I think, 65 miles an hour. And no engine, of course. We're a motorsport podcast, but of course there is no engine at all. Only cyclists sitting in each side of the hull, pedaling away to provide the power to feed the hydraulic motors that move those foils up and down in such amazing. They turn so sharply sometimes as well. It's an incredible spot. I'm just fascinated by it. And the fact that we've got Formula One team involved is really interesting. And maybe this is the year that Ben Ainsley can find. He won a gold medal doing dinghies, Ben Ainsley, back in the 2004 or something. So he's been sailing all his life. He won the America's Cup, but he was driving the American boat. That was about 10 years ago, I think. So they're so determined with Jim Radcliffe's very generous sponsorship. I mean, they should be right now as we're talking. I think literally.
So it's race number 5. So it's 2-2 in the final. Great Britain against Italy. So Luna Rossa, Pirelli Luna Rossa against the Ineos boat.
This is 75. So there's been lots of heats, hasn't there? This is
there's been weeks and weeks. You start off with six different countries or 8 different countries, and I'll tell you why people probably don't know anything about it. It's because the BBC. So we're based in the UK. The BBC Sport app does not. It's got everything on there. Lots of women's football, lots of random stuff. Nothing. So Great Britain are in the final of the oldest international competitive event in the world.
Outrageous.
There is not even a single mention on the whole BBC Sport app. That is disgraceful.
I know.
Absolutely
really
disgraceful. They need to have a word with themselves. Really, the oldest international competitive sport, and Great Britain in the final, competing for the most lucrative sailing thing there is, and nothing. Unreal.
I see they do some American basketball now. They promote or American.
They do everything.
I've seen trailers for American basketball on BBC.
And this is happening in Barcelona.
Yeah, Barcelona. But it's of the 4 races, it is frustrating to watch. I do warn you if you want to get into. But where's it on TNT? I think I don't know which one it's on now, but I watched. But they can't sail at very low winds. They made a rule. Someone picked 21 knots. If the wind is stronger than 21 knots on either the starter buoys or the turn buoys, you can't start the race. And in Barcelona, it's been 21.5 knots all day yesterday. And the clock goes, start in 5 minutes. And you go, got a beer on here, I watched all this. And then just as the clock comes down to 3, it jumps to 12. And you go, well, hold on a minute, we have failed the wind test. This went on all yesterday afternoon until my recording ran out. So I must say there are frustrations of watching the day.
It is frustrating. I went with Cupra a few weeks ago for the heats, and it was a storm, so there was no sailing at all.
Well, on the Saturday, I think it was, the wind was so low they couldn't move, they couldn't start.
That's right.
Then they did eventually start a race, which the Ineos was leading towards the end. When the wind dropped so much, they come off the foils, they sit in the water. Instead of doing 50 knots, they can now do about 5 knots, and they got a 45-minute maximum time.
Cut off.
So although Ainsley was leading, they said that's a no race. Then race one on Sunday, the sails broke on the Italian boat and they were trying to fix it, so they got disqualified. So Ineos won their second race thanks to a disqualification. But then yesterday, again, a bit like motor racing, exactly like motor racing, there's driving standards and driving tactics, and you can't chop people off or crowd people. And in fact, the Italians at the start of race yesterday, which is the 4th race that they've actually managed to make a result of, sort of chopped across the bow of Ineos. And you're supposed to give way if the wind's, if you're on the port or the starboard, I don't know which. But anyway, most Ineos and Brits say that it was an illegal move, but the stewards said no, they let it go. And because they chopped across the front, they took the wind off Ineos and they lost the race. So controversy as well, driving standards. But yeah, try and watch some of it. It is amazing to see those craft. And also,
you can watch it live on the YouTube. If you go onto the America's Cup page, you can actually watch it live.
Is that live now? Who's leading?
Great Britain.
Who's
Great
leading?
Britain are in the lead. Great Britain are in the lead. But there's nothing in it. But it's amazing.
Get the lead.
Yeah,
good. There was the first to 7. So it's the first to 7.
First to 7
qualifies
exactly.
to race against the holders, New Zealand, who they don't have to get through. They're in the final. So it's amazing.
Great Britain have got a phenomenal lead there. So let's wait and see
look at that.
So we'll announce that at the end of the podcast. Let's move on to some 4-wheel action and go to Chile. Poor old Elfyn Evans again. Forever the bridesmaid.
This is the year Elfyn Evans should have been world champion. He had the best car, but he finished second the last 3 years because there was a Seb Ogier in the way or a Kalle Rovanperä in the way. They both stepped aside, doing part-time entries this year. So surely Elfyn was going to be world champion, but he had mechanical troubles. The Hyundais have been going strongly. He's had the part-time world champions coming back and beating him, taking points off him, which I think I'd be pretty frustrated. I don't know what the Toyota are thinking. But now finally, the Chile Rally Chile, amazing stage, is very much like the old Rally GP, the sort of style of the stage is wonderful gravel roads, really fast and flowing. And this time, we had both the world champions against him in his own Toyota team. So Sebastian Ogier led the first couple of stages, but then clipped the rock. So frustrating in rallying, just clipped the rock, pulled the suspension out of the steering arm and was retired. So Elfyn took over the championship lead stage 3. And for the next day, slowly went faster and slowly pulled out a gap over Kalle Rovanperä, the reigning world champion, of course, also the Toyota. And by stage 10, he had a 13.6 second lead halfway through the rally. This was going to be Elfyn's rally. And then the fog came down on stage 11. Now, of course, every driver, when they get to the end of the stage, it's always, the window comes down. Well, you had a bit of trouble there, you dropped back. And they all said the fog was terrible. I couldn't see anywhere. And of course, the commentators tried to say, Elfyn got the worst fog. Now, maybe he did. Elfyn apparently said at one stage he was down to 2 miles an hour because he'd lost where the edge of the road was. It was that bad. It was a very traditional thing on the old Rally GB, the old RAC rally. They used to start at like 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. There was always mist and fog in those early stages. And I remember talking to people just following pace. They follow the pace notes. When I say follow them blindly, they literally follow them even in the fog. Anyway, so poor old Elfyn, the commentators all said he had the worst of the fog, and but his lead of 13.6 seconds went to a deficit of 5.5 seconds to Rovanperä, and he never recovered. Rovanperä then kept the hammer down, and Elfyn stayed with him on most of the stage times, but ended up being second. So frustrations.
I saw some Thierry Nivelles on board, and like you said about trusting your pace notes. My goodness, yeah. So you can't see probably 50, 100 yards. I don't know, because it's always been misleading. But incredible the pace notes and their co-driver.
Yep. The Hyundais finished 3rd and 4th. Tanak ahead of Neuville, and Neuville's now leading the championship with how many rounds to go? 2 to go. It looks like one of them will win it. Ogier is still the nearest challenger. I think Elfyn would have overtaken him if it hadn't been for his problems. They go to Central Europe in a couple of weeks' time, which is Czechoslovakia, Australia, Germany, and then the final in Japan. But it looks like Nerville's going to finally get that championship he's chased for so long. One shout out, Gus Greensmith was back on the podium in WRC2. He finished third and had a really good rally. So Gus keeps on coming back and does a good job in WRC2.
I think Thierry Neuville is as much as I wanted Elfyn to win it. Thierry Neuville, what a lovely, lovely man. As you know, I got to spend a weekend with him as well, and what a lovely, lovely, lovely man. So
he's got the French accent, doesn't he? French accent. He's Belgian. He speaks.
He's cool.
That's what I mean. He's cool. He wears cool shades. He quite often wears the yellow lenses for better visibility, and he always seems.
Well, he wears spectacles, so sometimes he'll wear shades, but they're prescription shades.
Prescription
spectacles.
Yeah. So all spectacular. I mean, it was amazing for great shots from down in Chile and great viewing. MotoGP wasn't any no four wheel action apart from coming back to Britain really on the circuits of the world. So it's MotoGP next, the amazing Indian Ocean lapping the shores of the Mandalika circuit down in Indonesia. But it was very dirty. They don't use the track much, and it wasn't very rubbered in. And there's always dirt and sea salt and sand coming over the circuit all day long. So in free practice, they're all falling like flies. Almost everybody seemed to have a drop off, especially at this turn 16, which would happen again in the race. It's an amazing corner because it's a really fast entry that then tightens to a hairpin. So you sort of got to go through this really quick, long right-hander, sort of slowly braking whilst leaning over on your motorbike. And then it really tightens to first gear last bit. And Jorge Martin was one of many to fall during free practice. Many of them did it. And it's I don't know quite how they do it, because the problem is they're braking all the way in. So you're slowly braking more and more and more. Then they get right down to the apex of the really tight first gear bit. And the problem is if your tyres aren't up to temperature or you've got them too much lean angle, when they take their hand off the front brake, right hand off the front brake, while you've got even a small amount of brake still on, you've got load on your front tyre, which gives grip. And the problem was, which I don't know how they work out, well, what do I do next? As soon as you come completely off the brake, the front comes up, you take some small amount of weight, comes off the front, and the front slides away from under you. So you've got to be so tentative when you
the margins are unbelievable, aren't
Yeah.
they? It's because typically in racing you brake in a straight line, but lots of smaller cars like Formula Ford or occasions you'll trail brake, which is similar sort of thing to this. But the margins, my goodness, and because you've only got two tiny little points of contact, the tiny bit of tyre and the tarmac is incredible.
Down you go. So, of course, it was this continuation, this incredible battle that MotoGP's got this year between Jorge Martin on the Pramac Ducati, the satellite Ducati, against the factory world champion Francesco Bagnaia. This championship's going on and on and on. And, of course, the battle is more intense because, of course, the winner will take the number one plate. And if Jorge Martin wins the world championship on his private Ducati, he'll take the number one to Aprilia, where he's running next year, because Marc Marquez is taking his place. So it's this trio of riders all involved with next year, where they're going to be, and the championship. Anyway, there was Jorge Martin on pole, leads at the first lap, gets to turn 16, and what happens? Down he goes. Incredible. So he actually literally rode the bike. So it was so slow, he got his knee. They tried to pick the bike up on their knee again, which some riders can occasionally do, but he got back going. But that was so he lost no points in the sprint race for Jorge Martin. Was Francesco Bagnaia said, "Thank you very much, mille grazie," and went on to win the sprint.
Grazie mille. Grazie mille, not mille grazie. Not often I can critique you on your languages, but grazie mille, not mille grazie.
Well, I can't remember that one. So Bagnaia won from his factory teammate Bastianini, and Marc Marquez, always there, was third. And he was only 12th on the grid after a very bad Q2, which, when he was interviewed after the heat of the moment, and he just, fuck Q2, because He always has problems in two. So he's always coming from low, well, not always, but recently he's been fighting back from lowly grid positions. And again, 12th to 3rd. In the Grand Prix, he came from 12th to, I think, about 4th or 5th, and the engine blew, quite a rare engine blow. So Marquez didn't make the end of the final. But there's no mistake in the Grand Prix itself.
Sorry, we'll come on to that in a moment. I'll let
Yeah, no mistake in the Grand Prix itself. This time, it was quite a dull race out front, in fact, because Jorge got the start again, and this time didn't fold the front under at turn 16. Went on to win quite easily from a fast chasing. Pedro Costa had a fantastic, again, he didn't fall for a change, which he's been doing a bit too much of recently. He came second. Bagnaia had yet another. He spins the wheel of the starts. These rocket starts they do. And Bagnaia have always had some bad starts recently when the wheel's just broken traction. Yeah. So he's dropped back. He dropped back to about 7th on the opening lap from 3rd on the grid, but he got back through to finish 3rd. So he was pretty happy. I don't know what the points gap is now. It's down. I wrote it down somewhere. Anyway,
8 points or 15
not a lot.
points.
It's closing. Still 24 points, I think, behind Martin. So, but
Marquez has been overtaken now. So you've got Spain, Italy,
Bastianini,
yeah, Spain, Italy, Spain, but they're all on Ducatis.
It's a fantastic drama. It's going to continue and continue. Of course, always good to see Susie out in the sunshine way. But so the commentary's so good. I mean, Neil Hodgson, comes out with such a wonderful insight as a rider. They just get dramatic and he laughs. He doesn't get too intense about it all. And just we have such a good commentary team there that you really do. If you haven't stopped, MotoGP is still going to the end of the year, another 4 races or something. So try to catch up. Moto2, sadly, Jake Dixon, our only British rider, crashed out and lost his very slim chance of taking the championship. And Aaron Canet, this very, very tattooed Canet, had his second win of the year, his second win. He's been racing for so long. Again, it was a bit of pedestrian out front, an easy win. Moto3 is never dull. It wasn't this time, never easy. We had a new British rider because Michael Laverty's been running this team to try and give Brits a chance. And of course, he's always been following Scott Ogden for about 3 seasons now. He hasn't quite, he qualified 12th and finished 13th. He never seems to he always seems to lose places down to the turn 1, always. He's had some good moments, but he's got a new teammate, Eddie O'Shea, who you might think comes from the Emerald Isle, but he may have hereditary Irish people, but he's from Leicester. And he did really well in FP1 and 2 and Q1 and 2. And they just got too carried away because in Q2, the fastest 14 in free practice go through. So he was trying to get into that top 14. He was only half a second of Ogden, never ridden around that track before, never been out in the heat of the world before. But he tried a bit too hard, tumbled down the track and broke his metacarpal. It was his birthday that weekend as well. So he couldn't race, but he looked really impressive. So he's taken with Josh Watley was the other one in that team earlier on who never quite got near to Scott. So Eddie O'Shea, hopefully he'll be fixed for Australia the next round. But it was another David Alonso special race. Alonso was another one that crashed in FP1, shook himself up a bit and wasn't really on his normal dominating, pole position pace. I think he qualified 4th or 5th or even 6th. And he's just such a smiling character. And he was there was a bunch of 6 out front, just crazy bunch of 6, dive bombing each other, slipstreaming past, going from 5th to 1st in 1 lap because you've got a good 3-bike toe, and just entertainment non-stop. But with about 3 laps to go, he was running about 6th, and then all of a sudden, boom, 3rd, boom, 2nd, and then I think it was the last lap of penultimate lap, 1st. Pins it, pulls out just a couple of bike lengths and wins yet again. His 9th win of the year. But he was being interviewed after the race, and he had this wonderful, smiling, bright-eyed conversation. And they sort of said, how were you going in the rain? He said, well, I was tired, I'm hurting, it's hot, I'm 6th. And I said to myself, okay, today I take the points. And then a lap later, he thought, no, my mechanics work hard. I break the bike. They work hard for me. It's not just for me, this race. It's for the mechanics that have worked. No, I'm not going to just take the points. Put a bit of effort in and work. A wonderful character. He will be a superstar of the future of the motorbike world.
Good stuff. More bikes, but
more
World
bikes.
Superbikes.
Toprak Razgatyoga was back after this injury to his lung thing. And he wasn't quite, instead of the last, I think it was 9 wins on the trot he had, didn't he? 3 weekends when he won all, swept the weekends before he had this accident in free practice down in wherever it was. We had 3 second places this time, nearly back to his old dominating form. And the first loss was an interesting story to Andrea Iannone, this Italian who was a MotoGP, sort of, top 3, top star, top running rider for quite a few years, but he got banned, a 4-year ban for drug use. And this was his first season back. So he's been off bikes for 4 years. He had an 18-month ban at first, then he appealed it, so they gave him 4 years. Sometimes appealing is not a good idea. Anyway, apparently he said he ate some, they always say they have a reason, don't they? He ate some bad steak in a foreign country. Because now in tennis, they're talking about the sinner. They've let him off a bit. If you follow tennis at all, he got no ban at all for being caught twice with a drug where he says it was a cream he rubbed into a scratch on his hand or something. But they accepted that. Anyway, that's another story. Anyway, so Iannone comes back, Superbikes, and wins his first win of the year. So quite a nice story. I know drugs should be not to be encouraged at all, but sometimes you think they are punished when they're not. I think sometimes it's the medical team, isn't it? The rider or the tennis player or the footballer or the runner. You take whatever supplements, don't you, that your trainer tells you to take. I know the responsibility is always you, the competitor, must read every chemical that you shouldn't have, and anyone ever offers you something, you've got to read everything. So sometimes I think people are in a sedition. Anyway, and the second 2 races you're beaten by the factory Ducati of Alvaro Bautista. But it was all close races, all good, wonderful racing. Alex Lowe's, unfortunately, a big shunt and went out, a bit battered and bruised, but will live to fight another day. And then the Superbikes, we say, they kept Donington, the British Superbikes. Do you want to see live? Are we still leading?
That's
we
it.
Won.
GB
we won.
Win, yeah.
Yes. 3-2. 3-2. One more race this afternoon later, isn't it? Almost immediate. It's about a 1 hour gap, in fact, isn't it? So, yes.
British
Superbike. Carl Ryde, another sort of fight back story, a bit like MotoGP. He had 2 more wins up at Donington. The third win been taken by Glenn Irwin on the Ducati, who is third in the points, but doesn't look like he's got enough to catch, because the battle is between reigning champion Tommy Brimewell, Honda, who led the championship quite a big margin earlier on, but Ryde's now had 7 wins out of the last 12 rounds. So it all goes to Brands Hatch in 2 weeks' time. And I think Ryde's now about 3 or 4 points ahead of Tommy Brimewell. So well worth going.
I thought it was a Brands Hatch this weekend.
No, that's the British GT, which is the next thing on the story.
Where were British Superbikes?
2 weeks' time.
No, where were they this weekend?
Oh, Donington. They were at Donington this weekend. Yeah, Donington this weekend. There's touring cars next at Brad's. It's GT touring cars.
It's something every week,
consecutive weekends. So that 2 weeks' time, Brands Hatch the place to be for the Superbike shootout, and Brands Hatch is the place to be to see Ricky and Rob and Ricky Collard win the British GT Championship in the Lamborghini, run by the wonderful Barwell, which I think my brother might have something to do with. A great story, really. They're all in tears. And Rob's actually won it before, about 3 years ago, I think, with another partner. But to take your son out and win a GT championship in a Lamborghini, wonderful story.
Amazing.
And in fact, the other Barwell car finished second in the Drivers' Championship, Sandy Mitchell and Alex Martin. So they won the teams and came first and second in the Drivers' Championships for the Lamborghini. Brilliant. Well done, Barwell. Well done, brother. Well done, bruv.
So has he ever listened to this?
The what?
Has he ever listened to this?
Listens. No, he don't. He'll be hungover this morning. He'll be in a terrible state this morning anyway. The only other big meeting, of course, NASCAR.
He must be younger than you.
16 years younger. Yeah, it was a bit of a mistake. Wow. I mean, a bit of a surprise to my parents when he returned. I think Mum and Dad thought they were past it. And whoopsie. So Chris Needell down at Barwell. So about the motorsport, big international course was NASCAR. We always follow the NASCAR because it's getting exciting, isn't it, Paul?
It was, yeah. What's the
It's
Melon Man be
shootout
doing?
time.
I'm
I can
intrigued.
tell you're getting excited. The shootout time. We've now lost.
So remind me,
4.
where are we in the shootouts? We're
This is
down
the
to 12
first-
from 16.
So the first of 3 races to cut from 12 to 8. So it's 3 races. The first of 3 with points all building up and losing and dropping. And Kyle Larson, who had been leading the points, had a slow puncture early on, which Hanley was, and then he kissed the wall, came in, full puncture gone, in and out of the pits, and he damaged his Venturis at the back. Had a terrible time and ended up finishing 26th. So instead of being leading the points, he's now down to about 5th, I think, out of the 8 that go through. So he's towards in the bottom half. But it annoyed me a bit. The reason why I had so much trouble getting the car up to speed again is, of course, this flipping aero stuff that they seem to have to introduce to all sports because we have to be scientific. But the aero diffusers on the back of NASCARs, if you get a puncture, your Venturi, your fins are scraping on the track. As soon as you lose all the pressure out of the tyre, which happens often, they have tyres blow out. When they spin at 200 miles an hour, you see the tyres pop because they lock up all 4 wheels. Once they got it sort of pointing away from the walls, you just anchor up all 4 wheels, lock up, and all 4 wheels can go flat. If you then drive back at any speed at all, you scrape your stupid Venturis on the ground. And so you then have a car that doesn't handle the rest of the race. I mean, it's just an unnecessary bit of science. Do they really need it? You know, we want racing. We don't want people handicapped by stupid regulations. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now. Maybe it was because it was Kyle that it hurt. But the track, this 1.5 mile Kansas, they're doing 200 miles an hour. It's quite an impressive track. The restarts, it's a huge, wide place. And they're 5 wide, 4 wide, incredibly exciting, the restarts for about 5 laps until they're all then settle down almost in a single file. So quite a few shunts on some of the restarts to keep everyone happy. But it ended up being this great battle out front between Kyle Busch, who hasn't won a race this year, isn't in the playoffs, has won a race every year for 19 years, but he's now only got about 5 left because he was being pressured by Ross Chastain. The 2 of them are out front, neither of them in the playoffs. And he was just under pressure, and he tried to go by trying to lap someone and got dirty air, lost control, spun out. So poor old Kyle Busch didn't win yet, still hasn't. And Ross Chastain went on for a fairly unchallenged win towards the end, fairly processional towards the end. And of course, he's the 7th generation melon farmer. And so he always, now when he wins, he gets on the roof of his car and smashes a melon into the ground. It's always good. It's show business, NASCAR.
The entertainment is off the scale. It's amazing.
So now there are top 8, 12. The first one out of the bubble, who also had a terrible road, Tyler Reddick, was never on the pace. He's the points champion. They also have a points champion at the end of the year. And he won the points championship from Kyle Larson by 1 point. They have about 3,000 points. Well, maybe not that many. So Tyler Reddick is the first one outside in 9th. So all building up. Next weekend, it's the complete lottery of Talladega, baby. 210 miles an hour, flat out. Everyone flat out. And of course, anyone could get crashed out, lose all those points. So it's a complete terrifying situation for all those top 8. So if they get taken out in a big shunt early on, they'll be out of the top 8 and into the drop zone. So a lot of nervous nail biting in Talladega next weekend. What
else on next weekend?
Yeah, not a lot. MotoGP end up in Japan, the Motegi circuit, which is north of Tokyo, not used. I think the Super Formula go there. Otherwise, very little going on. Talladega, MotoGP, or BTCC. All eyes in Britain's television on the battle between Young Hill
and Jake Hill.
Ingram. Yeah, Tom Ingram, Jake Hill should be. People sort of think Jake should win it because he hasn't won it. The others will have. But Ingram seems to be the man on form at the moment, sort of setting the pace. Yeah. So weather will be.
What about the balance of power? What will happen there, or the hybrid?
Well, they're
balance?
They're not that far apart, I think, because they're first and second in the championship. I think they both got very similar amounts of hybrid allowances. But I think weather is crucial. Yeah,
I was going to say it's probably going to rain. Yeah,
yeah, it's a bit greasy and wet. The rear wheel drive is sort of at a disadvantage, I think, to the front.
And is it the full circuit?
Yeah, the nice draw, which isn't easy to overtake. It's a great circuit to drive around. but overtaking isn't easy. There aren't that many opportunities.
This is Tiff. This is BTCC. There'll be dive bombing going
They'll
into
be
Canada. There'll be
making-
dive bombing in
they'll
Druids. There'll
make-
be dive.
They'll make space for themselves.
Don't you worry about that. There'll be plenty of overtaking.
Sunday, either on your telly all afternoon or down at Brands Hatch itself for the final round. But in the evening, get the beers in, sit and watch Talladega, baby. You probably want to you want it on fast forward. You want to sort of don't start watching it till it's already run for 2 hours because all the yellow flag cautions. It's time to go for a beer and get another burger.
Tiff, I got a better idea. Instead of watching it, just come on Monday and listen or watch this on YouTube or listen to it on Spotify, where we'll be back, by the way. We're back on Spotify, so sorry about the last couple of weeks. And then you can get your Talladega fix from Tiff instead. Until then, have a good week. Speak to you soon. Thanks for joining.
Cheers all.
Bye.